Hi, I'm Winifred Davis. The last three videos I did was a marathon, an all-night bender. Now, when we go on all-night benders and don't get much sleep, we're prone to make mistakes, and I made a couple. Now, I've listed the corrections below this video as well as the previous three videos. Now, I'm going to be reading. It's not that I don't know what I'm talking about, but I just don't want to make mistakes. I'm not going to leave it up to my memory. Now, the first correction, as I was repeating the types of music that I enjoy, I said Tuvan and Inuktituk, throat dancing. It should have been throat singing. And for the life of me, when I listened to the recording, I was thinking to myself, I would like to see the acrobatics that would be involved in throat dancing. The second correction concerns Fela, Anikulapo, Ransom, Kuti, the Nigerian activist in the 70s, 80s, and into the mid-90s. Now, I said his type of music was Afrofunk. I wasn't exactly correct there, and that was a mistake. It's Afrobeat, but funk is part of what makes Afrobeat. Okay, it's a part of Afrobeat. Now, the third correction, I was speaking about the soul, the history of the soul, and how it could affect our brain, whether we're left brain or right brain. And I couldn't think of the word at the moment. I said affect our personality, but it's not really our personality. No. That's not correct. Left brain means that I tend to be more analytical, that you tend to communicate more, you can strategize, problem solve, and memorize. Whereas right brain deals with intuition, imagination, emotion, and intuition. Now, both sides of the brain, they're not separate, okay? But some people tend towards being one or the other, and some people are more or less balanced. I'm more or less balanced, but as souls who need to have experience, that's what we're here on this earth to do, is to grow. We eventually will balance out, okay? So if we are more left brain as opposed to right brain, then eventually there will be some sort of equilibrium. And the brain, as I said, it doesn't really separate. There's constant communication going on between both hemispheres. Now, the fourth correction that I would like to make, when I spoke about the entity who was my mother in this lifetime, I mentioned that in another lifetime, in a past life, she had bashed me over the head and cracked my skull with a stone. I said it occurred in Crimea. I guess I had Crimea on my mind. It was actually Odessa. When I went back, when I listened, I said, no, it wasn't Crimea. It was Odessa. And she was a male then in that particular lifetime. And she was about 38, and I was about 16, perhaps younger. Now, the fifth mistake that I made, which I thought when I listened to the video, I said, oh my God, what have I done here? I said jousting began in northern Scotland. Oh, that is so wrong. I meant to say in northern France, in Normandy, by the Normans, descendants of Vikings. Normandy was, how would I put it, captured by Rollo. He was the founder of that particular part of the Norman Empire, if you want to put it that way, or kingdom or whatever, in northern France. Now, please remember what I said the last time, that I'm not here to lead anyone, and I do not wish to be a leader of anyone or anything. I'm just a vessel, a messenger, delivering a message from the collective, which includes my guides. I'm fulfilling my self-soul contract, and at the same time, my Neptunian journey. I've stepped out from the shadows. I do not even like taking pictures. I'm a secretive person, and that is good for the vocation that I do, because confidentiality is required. Now, the history of my many karmic journeys were rife with betrayals. Not just one past life, not just too many. And that cost me my life in many of my past lives. Now, part of my soul contract is also to serve as living proof, testament to the truth that is reincarnation and its facts. I'm not perfect, and I don't pretend to be. So it's not like I don't practice what I preach. I make mistakes. Remember, I'm just delivering a message, so I will make those mistakes. As I said, I am not perfect. I'm not here to proselytize. I'm not here to convert anyone. And please, do not freely interpret what I say. Say exactly what I say. And as I used in the past videos, the example, if I say the sky is blue, I don't mean it's sky blue, marine blue, navy blue, royal blue. I said blue. That would encompass all shades of blue, which I would imagine the amount of shades must number in the thousands. Now, if you do not understand something, please send me an email or ask me in the comments below. And remember now, when we freely interpret things, a little fish that's about 1 inch in an aquarium, by the time the 20th person repeats, interprets and repeats, that small 1 inch fish becomes a whale in an ocean. A whale is a mammal. It's not even a fish. And an ocean is certainly not an aquarium. Now, you might not agree with the message I give. That is fine. Each of us evolves according to our own light. There's no need for you to leave rude messages. Use your free will to switch from this video. I cannot be bullied. I have a keen sense of myself, who I am. I know the history of my soul and why I am on earth. Why I am on earth. I cannot be deterred. I shall not be deterred, because I must fulfill my soul contract. Now, exciting news for me. I had many revelations over the past month. I even discovered who my third husband was in that lifetime I spoke about when I went to Ireland. I discovered who that person was, that entity in this lifetime. Passed on. It's passed on now. But didn't reveal that to me then. But he did a couple weeks ago. And I will be covering that in my book dealing with that particular lifetime. I also discovered another lifetime that was revealed to me, and I understand why. I incurred so much karma, so much karmic debt in that lifetime. I learned more things about who I am and why I do certain things. In that lifetime, I traveled much and have done through most of my lifetimes since then. As a politician and a diplomat in 2 of my lifetimes, as a warrior, historian, and hobo in Russia, itinerant monk, and the 17-year-old traveling on an English supply ship that was sunk in 1943 during World War II. Indeed, I traveled a lot, and in this lifetime, I have and I do travel a lot. And I remember when my daughter, many years ago, when she was small, and one night she accompanied my dad to the airport to pick me up. And she looked at her grandfather and she said, you know, this is where my mommy lives. Well, that tells you how much I travel. Now, among the other skills that I learned in this lifetime that now I understand, I was a troubadour. Now, what is a troubadour? That's someone who writes songs, poetry, and music. And I was also a protector of troubadours. I was in a position to protect other troubadours. The thing is, most troubadours would write about courtly love in this particular period of time. But I didn't write about courtly love. I wrote about political issues and war, just as I do now. And as I said, I was a spoken word movement performer. And I have written songs. And most of my poetry deal with political issues, war, and justice. Now, I was a fearless warrior in that lifetime. I went to war all the time. I spent my whole youth, from I was 15 actually, until I died, going to war. I guess that was the time and the era. And there was a cruel side to me, but I love children. And my last act was to show mercy to a child before I died, even though that child struck the blow that took my life. That will be a story for another time. I also thought about justice. I was stubborn during that lifetime, very stubborn. Independence was important, and believe me, I danced to my own tune and to no one else's. But I was also filled with pride and lust, believe it or not. So that was not exactly, it was an illustrious lifetime, a historic one. But at the same time, as I said, it's not who you were in your lifetime, in your past lives, but what did you do? I did well, but I also committed so many incorrect actions. And one more thing I will say, that lifetime, Normandy was very important to me. And fancy that in the other lifetime that was revealed a year before I was involved, Normandy was important as well. And in this lifetime, well, my race is black. But I am a kaleidoscope in reality of races, ethnicities, and different cultures. Normandy figures in a part of that kaleidoscope. Very important, actually. But as I said, I will cover that in another book. And one more thing I will say, that lifetime also will serve as testament to one fact in reincarnation. And that is that we have different relationships in different lifetimes with different people. Or with the same person, I would say. So, in that lifetime, I actually was the rival in war to an entity with whom I have shared. And that entity actually was also from the past life that I will disclose in the book I'm speaking about. That entity is one with whom I've shared as few as 31 lifetimes and as many as 43, if not more. I think I am now on to about the 15th lifetime that I've shared with that entity. Most of them has been as partner in life, wife and husband. But we have been sisters, and now we were rivals, and sister and brother as well. And here we were on opposing sides. But the interesting thing is, even though we were on opposing sides, that relationship was one that was quite admirable and strange, some people might think, because we both had the utmost respect for one another and just various little things. But anyhow, I won't continue this now. That's for another day. Now, I'm available for seminars, conferences, lectures, whether in person or in virtual. So you can go to my website and fill out the forms there, or send me an email. Now, as I said at the beginning, I will read mostly, not because I don't know what I'm talking about, but because I don't want to miss important points. Now, in my last 3 videos, I gave a brief summary of the truth that is reincarnation and its facts, and various applications of this truth in our daily lives. I spoke about the importance of names, even middle names, and the importance of those middle names, because if you will recall, if you had a chance to listen to the previous 3 videos, I just thought those were not important, because we do, in most instances, we do choose the names before we come to this lifetime, the current lifetime, before we do. Now, I thought middle names were just not important. My guide said, look it up. Look up your name, which is Carol. And I was stubborn. I'm sometimes very stubborn. But I couldn't write. I was just writing nonsense. Well, I went and looked it up, and my goodness, it was exactly me. It spoke of freedom and independence. And that's what I am about. Music and dance and laughter. And lo and behold, I should discover this lifetime in which I was a poet and I wrote songs. As a matter of fact, I was listening to one of the songs that I wrote and reading the poetry, one of the poems that was put to music. So that's interesting. Now, as I said, we usually choose our own names before we are born, so they will reflect different aspects of who we are. The names that we choose could reflect the time period in which we had a past life or past lives that will be very important, relevant to this current lifetime. It might reflect parts of our personality, skill sets. For example, my lifetime, I chose the same name in 3 different lifetimes when I was a healer. Now, my guides also gave me a male name, and this one was a loaded name. It had so many different periods that anyone having that name or choosing that name, it was just so loaded. It spoke of different careers, different skill sets, different time periods. It covered sports, the arts, so many things, personalities. It wasn't funny, and that name was Roman in English, a Roman in French, and a Raman in Russian. And forgive my pronunciation if I pronounce the names incorrectly in the other languages. Now, I also covered health, how knowing the history of one's soul will explain certain exceptions. For example, in health, I spoke of carryover illnesses, like where we have weak spots. And going back to the lifetime that I just recently discovered, I realized why I have problems in one of my shoulders, because I had died from an arrow in that shoulder in a past lifetime. It had gotten gangrene, and I died from that gangrene. So that's why my shoulder tends to be a soft spot, as I like to say. Now, phobias and fears, what we're good at, people we like or don't like, and also what we did. For example, if we were vocations, I should say. For example, if we were a fisherman in a past life, chances are if we're not a fisherman in this lifetime, we probably have a hobby of fishing. We love to fish. We probably love to eat fish as well. We probably love being near the water, river, lake, ocean, sea. Or if we don't have a chance to do that, to be near the river, ocean, lake, or sea, we probably have an aquarium. And also, if you were a chef, connected with food in a past life, chances are in this lifetime, if you're not a chef again, you probably love cooking, or you probably love to feed people, cook and feed people. And you love to see people eat, and you like to try good food and make certain that they're okay. And if you have a staff, the person who operates in your kitchen, your cook, your chef, is probably the most important, or one of the most important persons on or in your staff. Okay, now what we're going to be doing today here, you can go back over those videos. They are long, and I'm sorry about that, but it's just an awful lot of things to cover. I'll try to make this one. This one's going to be in 3 parts, this particular one. I'm going to cover death, okay? In this first part, I'm going to talk about death, death as seen through the eyes of the soul. The second video will give you some pointers about solace and how to cope with losing a loved one. And in the third video, I will speak about what death is and what death is not. Different peoples, different cultures interpret or see death in different ways. Now, believe it or not, when you see death through the eyes of the soul, all of those different things actually come together. Now, I have written a book that's available on Amazon, and I have listed it below. It is called Death Through the Eyes of the Soul, The Welcome Breather. So what I'm going to speak about is covered in detail in that book. Now, everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die. How can that be? Once we decide to enter this earthly plane and do, it is a certainty that we must die. As soon as we're born, our cells begin to age. So, as soon as we're born, we start to die. None of us can escape. It is a rule in this organic body, the host of our spirit. It is the law of nature. It's natural law. If you want to say universal law, that we must die. And we cannot escape. And through the eyes of the soul, when your time is nigh, your time is nigh. And you can't escape. And to this life you come without baggage when you're born. All of us. No matter how rich a family you're going to enter, you're born naked, just like someone who has nothing, born into a family that has nothing. And when we die, we can be in very expensive caskets or whatever, but the spirit departs, whether you're rich or poor, and whatever it is that you're buried with, it stays in the grave, and it might rot, or if it's something that doesn't decompose, it will stay there for eternity, right? Ashes to ashes, and dust to dust. And I'll show you the certainty of death. And it's, maybe you've heard this story before. It goes like this, that death was sent. Let us say the Grim Reaper had come and he had a list. So he went according to the list, and one day he went to the person who was next on that list. That person invited death in, and he fed him. He showed him such hospitality that death was so impressed. But what had happened was, while death was eating and enjoying himself, the host had gone on the list and he had removed his name, put it to the bottom of the list, and put the last person's name to the top of the list. And so when death had finished, and he was very happy, as I said, with the hospitality that he was shown, he said, I'm going to do you a favor. I'm not going to take you now. What I'm going to do is I am going to put your name at the bottom of the list. Well, guess what happened? Remember? He had removed his name to the bottom and put somebody else's name at the top. Well, it was him. So he did die, even though he did that. And another story I will tell you was when I was in my teen years, I heard on the radio on Sunday that there was a plane crash. A plane had crashed in a house. And what had happened was, apparently, the wife of the person who died when the plane crashed in the house had gone to a psychic or a card reader. And the card reader had told the wife of the man who was now deceased from the plane that crashed in the house, told her that your husband's gonna die. I know he travels a lot, but he's gonna die in a plane crash, and it's very soon, within a matter of weeks. So what the lady did was, her husband was supposed to travel that very day, and she told him, please don't travel, because, you know, the psychic had predicted that what would happen. Well, would you believe that a plane did crash in that house on that day, and he died? Now, that's a very sad story. Now, death is viewed. Okay, I'm just going to give you a little summary of how death, the origin of death, you know, how different peoples around the world view death and what they think the origin was. When did death start? Okay, now, so death is viewed as punishment universally. Certain common threads run through most of the origin of death stories. Death usually results from greed, envy, malice, disobedience caused by hubris or arrogance, impatience, and curiosity. You know, curiosity killed the cat. And curiosity is like opening Pandora's box at times. Now, death, this story comes from the Jola in Senegal. Now, they hold that, according to them, I should say, God gave man and woman 2 bags. The bigger one was filled with resentment, food, and death. The smaller one had immortality. So God asked which one they wanted. And the woman chose the bigger one. So she chose death for mankind. And so death came to earth and lived amongst us. It is also interesting to note that in all these origin stories, most of them, maybe 95% of them, and don't take my 95% as being, you know, statistically correct, but because it's so overwhelming, most of the time it's a woman who does something that results in death occurring amongst us. Now we see the hubris, the arrogance that causes death in this story from the Cham of Cambodia. Now they're an Austronesian people, and you find them in Cambodia and Vietnam. Excuse me. Contrary to the laws of nature, the goddess of good luck used to resuscitate people as quickly as they died. And then, exasperated by her constant interference, because, you know, they died, the sky god banished her, you know, this goddess of good luck, banished her to the moon, where she could no longer bring back the dead to life. Now, the Ashanti has another story that shows our arrogance, and it tells of the tale of this old woman. I just say it briefly. She kept moving her stool every time God would put another stool so that he could be higher than her stools. She would put another stool so that she could reach the same height as God. And then you have malice, which is the Arawakan and Arawakan speaking peoples in Guyana. And they tried to kill God. And then you have the story of the Bambuti in the Ituri forest in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And it's impatience that causes death, because death, the God told his children, do not follow me, I will be back. But what did they do? They were impatient, and so they followed him, and then death came amongst men. Now, usually it's women, but there's one story that involves a man, and this is from the Katish Aboriginals of Central Australia. And it's also the Unmatjera people as well, group as well. And the story says that the man of the curlew totem, in his anger, he kicked the body of a man into the sea, and that's how death spread amongst us. In that instance, death is also accidental, and a man, not a woman, caused death. Now, death can be viewed from different perspectives. So you have the medical, the legal, the philosophical, the scientific, and the psychological, and even the poetic perspective of death. And I have my own perspective in poetry as well. But we're going to look at Pope, the poet Pope. Now, each of these views contributes to a more complete view of death, because they're all right in some aspect. Now, the definition of death from the medical perspective has been an ever-evolving one. It's always changing. So as technology and science advance, and you have different machines and equipment that keep people alive, keep the heart going and what have you, they've had to change the definition of death. And I won't go into that I go into details in my book on that. Okay, I'm just giving an overall tidbit, so to speak. Now, the Greek philosopher Epicurus, now his philosophy says there is no afterlife, and that philosophy is the same as the Maasai, which is a people group in Kenya, and they don't believe in an afterlife either. Now, according to Epicurus, he believed that our existence was just one big long sequence of events. And then when we died, that's our heart and our soul died, and that was it. That was a definitive end. There was no afterlife. It was just poof, you're gone. You were here and then you're gone. You exist no more in any form, just like the Maasai. Then you have Rene Descartes with his mechanistic view, and actually brainstem death, which was one of the ways in which death was defined in medicine, was with the brainstem. And as I said, I go into all the details in my book. And then you have the psychologist, Robert Kostenbaum. And he says that death is what gives power to religion. He says religion is mostly getting people to shape up. I'm reading here. Shape up or go to hell. Without death, he says, one wonders what would become of religion. Right? All religions, whether we're talking about Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, and the different other types of religion, Tingriism, and what we would like to say are pagans, but all religions, all people, right? Peoples all over the world. Now, Alexander Pope, in his poem Windsor Forest, he adroitly says, death unites and separates us, because in death, right, we are equal. We're united. Indeed, we are united in death, but it separates us. It separates the dead from the living. Now you have the different religions, and they have their views about death and the afterlife. And you have New Age movements, you know, they have their views, which, for example, most of them see where we just keep repeating birth, death, rebirth, until, you know, it's in perpetuity. It never stops. For Buddhists, eventually it stops where there's a dissolution to the peace of nirvana. And of course you have Christianity, what I call the Abrahamic religions, which includes Christianity and Judaism and Islam. And Judaism, when we study Judaism, we'll see that what death and the afterlife are has actually evolved from, it's changed over the millennia. And so you have, an afterlife, some, like a breezy garden for some of these religions, a breezy garden, or you're damned to hell forever. And of course you have that period of waiting where you're waiting for that resurrection morn. What is interesting with the Druze, which is a sect of Islam, during that period of waiting where you die and you wait until resurrection morn, they see it as that waiting period is a period that you could say it's reincarnation, because you need to cleanse, right, purify your soul. And like you have purgatory, right, in Catholicism, but their form of purgatory, it's different, but let me put it that way, is rebirth, so that you will learn and purify during your period of waiting. Now let's get on. I'm sorry for saying now, but it's just habit. Do forgive me. My book, Death Through the Eyes of the Soul, as I said, will go into details about what I'm speaking now. Now, how is death viewed through the eyes of the soul? Death is the welcome breather that facilitates, makes reincarnation possible, because in order to be born again, you have to die, right? As you go from one lifetime to the other, you have to die in order to be born again. Now, after death, we return to the spiritual plane. We learn, we review. We're always learning. We decide with our guides and others of the hierarchies. and with those with whom we have karmic debt, so to speak, to settle. I can't think of a better way to put it. I don't like putting it that way, but it is what it is. What the next journey will be, we choose with advice. We never stop learning. It is up to us to listen or not listen with our free will to the advice that we're given. Okay? God never gives anyone more than we can bear. We choose what trials we are going to undergo in a particular lifetime. And as I said in my other videos, sometimes it's too much, and so you have a stillbirth. You decide not to bother. Sometimes stillbirths can be caused by organic failure. Maybe the body is not, the host is, not ready. Their defaults, so to speak, and you have other reasons. And sometimes we commit suicide. It's just too much for us to bear. So we return to the spiritual plane, and in maybe another, when we are ready, we will choose to go through this, whatever the particular trial that we had to go through. Now, for some of us, okay, we've made our choice, but when we die, okay, we have some of us have several departure gates. For some people, or most people, it is predetermined. But once again, for some, they can have up to 4 or 5 departure gates. 5 chances to go, and they decide not to go for whatever reason. However, no matter how many departure gates you might have, there is definitely a final one. And the fact that the host of the spirit, the host of our soul, is organic, ashes to ashes, dust to dust, it's not going to last forever. It must die according to the laws of the universe. There are no exceptions to that rule. There are only exceptions to the laws and rules of man, and especially with his imposter justice. Death can be natural. The body just gives out. Or you're sick and you die. Could be, as I said, suicide. You just can't bear it anymore. Okay? And it could be homicide. Now, homicide consists of murder, and it could be accidental, but it's still homicide, and I guess that's the legal definition. I won't get into that. Actually, I do get into it in my book. Now, accidental death includes witchcraft. Now, I'm not gonna deal with that here. That is the role of the shaman to deal with that, but I'm not dealing with it here. But all I will say to you is this: what you do not know can indeed hurt you. I know. I have been a shaman for more than 35 years, and my late husband was one on top of his field. He was a shaman. He was one for 60 years before he passed away. Now, I believe in the empiricism of science, but I also know that science, like all of us, whilst we are here in this earthly plane, eternal spiritual beings that we are experiencing temporary human life, we are all prisoners of the senses, so that sight, taste, sense, hearing, feeling, right? And that's what science, that's how you prove things in science, right? You have to see it to believe it. Now, as a shaman, I am the fish that is coming from the bottom of the river. And if I tell you that a shark, I saw a shark, and I had to run from that shark, do not doubt what I say. In Jamaica, that's what the saying says. If fish come from down a river bottom and tell you say shark, did they? Believe him. In a twist to that saying, is sort of like he who feels it knows it. Some of us are fortunate enough to sense or know that our time is nigh. When we're about to die, we kind of sense it. We just know it. And so, for example, when we're terminally ill or old, we know the time is nigh. Some of us do not consciously know it, but our spirit does. And so we begin to do things that we have not done in a very long time. We might call a family reunion and cook a meal. We might pick up the phone and call someone with whom we've had a beef for a long time and try to solve the problem, make good. We might take a trip to some place we haven't been in years. We might start making our will. We start putting things in order. And they seem just, not out of the way. Your spirit knows, but you don't. I call that the slow drum beat to the other side. And sometimes, just before we go, we are awaiting someone. We want to see someone, the face of someone, before we close our eyes. My book goes into details about all this. Sometimes others are privy to our departure through dreams, visions, or visits on the astral plane. Now, I've had many experiences with people who have announced their deaths to me before they depart. Might be weeks, days, or hours. Now, this was the case on 911, and I've memorialized that. And we're talking about, I think it's what? Is it September 11th? Right. 911. Now, I think I fell asleep around 4 in the morning. And I found myself actually in Jamaica, in the country. And when I looked on the streets, on the road, I saw all these people who had departed, and they were covered up on, what do they call them, gurneys? Covered over with white sheets, an awful lot of them. And all of a sudden they're telling me, tell the world goodbye. Tell them we are gone. And amongst them I saw my stepdad. He was also waving. And he passed away about a month later. Now, when I came back from wherever I was, and I just stood up like a robot and said, I'm back. And the phone rang immediately. And I ran to get the phone, and it was someone telling me, turn your TV on. If you don't have it on, the plane is about to hit the second tower. And it was as my vision or my travel to the astral plane showed me, and all these people telling me, tell the world we're gone, tell the world goodbye, because it was so many that I do believe I am right. They had to line the people up on the streets. So sometimes others have visions. And when the person the entity who was my husband, that Irishman, in that important lifetime that I had that's relevant to my journey, before he passed away, and we were very close actually, but I didn't know at the time, it wasn't revealed. But I think he knew because he was a psychic and a past life reader, but when your guides tell you you're not supposed to tell, then you can't. And before he passed, I had the vision. And I guess he probably sensed he was going, because the very morning before he passed away, he phoned me, as we always had our little phone call conversations early in the morning. But he phoned me earlier and said, I'm going to go do service now. And a couple hours later, he was gone. Now, in this war on Gaza as well, I've had children, lots of children come. And there's a little boy dressed in a superhero costume, who sometimes he can't help those children to get over into the light. So he brings them to me, or to my grandmother. So that's how it goes. And at the same time, there are some of us, and that little boy sometimes finds little children and brings them to somebody else that I won't name at this time, helps them find the missing children, find their families. Now, once death occurs, the metaphorical cord, and I say metaphorical cord because it's a metaphor, because it's not really a cord, so to speak. String or thread, whatever you want to call it, it's severed, it's cut, just like the umbilical cord. So when we leave, there's a cord that is cut, and when we arrive, there's a cord that is cut. And once that cord is cut, when we leave this earthly plane, it's permanent. So at this moment, we can no longer feel any pain, no matter how violent that death is. Okay? Some of us might hang around our body on and off, intermittently, until the funeral rites are performed. Perhaps a final farewell, I guess, to our host body and this lifetime. We might also choose not to hang around that body, not even to go to our funerals, because we have other things to do and we're just not interested. That happens, believe it or not. Some of us believe that if we stay around close to our dead host body, we will remain alive. Well, that of course is delusion of the highest order. After death, our spirit is usually in a state of confusion when we transition back. Because just imagine, okay, you're going back from one plane to another. So that's normal. the length of this state of confusion when we transition back, it's, all depends on our ties to the material affinities. The less our ties, that we can just leave this world and not miss anything, is the shorter the length of the confusion. Now, the knowledge of what happens in the spiritual realm also helps us in reducing or eliminating the state of confusion. Now, as I said, this state of confusion might last a few hours, and believe it or not, it could last a few years. After death, our spirit enters what we might liken to a valley or a tunnel. We are moving into the light if we choose to. We have to readjust to another plane. And just as when we come to this earth, we come in a veil of darkness. And the umbilical cord is cut, right? And you can see this sometimes when babies are born. They have this stunned look on their faces, sort of like, where am I? Who are you? Where am I? What am I doing here? Just really stunned look. Now, our tie for the moment to the spiritual realm when we die is severed when we're born, right? And that's why, it's just this sort of confusion for some. Now, how long our spirit decides to linger before entering the full light is up to us. It is in this light that our spirit will begin to learn and teach and prepare for the next journey, the next reincarnation. Spirits of all vibration levels can cross into the light. And before you come back to this earth, you have to cross into the light. I go in that in details in my book. Earthbound spirits must lift their vibration so they can go into the light. All of us need to. They too will eventually lift the light, as I said. And not just in order to come back in another lifetime, but in order to climb up the rung eventually. It's not a question of if, but one of when. Now, psychic mediums and shamans communicate with the deceased by raising their vibrations to that of the deceased in order for us, to communicate with them. Some of us who are of high vibrations do teach those of lower vibrations. So we learn and we can teach. We teach those of lower vibrations and we learn from others of higher vibrations. And we tend sometimes to stick with those who are of similar affectations, similar, likes, who are like us, at least when we are of not already upon the higher rungs of that ladder of soul restoration or soul evolution. And sometimes we might not be able to communicate with someone when we pass over because maybe there was a friction, and so you need to heal for there to be proper rapprochement. Okay? Now, that healing might start in another lifetime as well as in the spiritual plane. Those of very high vibrations can go anywhere and be in communication with all groups, whereas those of very low vibrations are kind of, I don't like to say restricted, but I'm going to say restricted. And sometimes those of higher vibrations are not visible to them. And usually, when you have people are wavering, because some of us do waver, we're sort of like fence sitters, and we waver, then sometimes it's best not to have that communication, that temptation, because evil can spread. Remember now, misery loves company, right? And so they would just love more company. So once again, we can be both teachers and pupils, and we normally are. Now, as we learn in the spiritual plane, we plan with the guidance of our guides, as I said, and the hierarchies, the next expiation and trials that we have to undergo. How long we stay in the light before we return depends largely on us. Some of us reincarnate quickly, as in the case of children who have died suddenly, or might take decades or even centuries. And what I have seen is no longer than 500 years, but you can go all the way up there. Usually 50 to 100 years, that's normal. And as little as 1 year, as children who've died accidentally, by accident and what have you. Sometimes when people, psychics or whomever, when they speak, they go into the light and they speak of heaven, it's when we explain things, we have to explain things within the, what our senses, our sight and sound and hearing, what we understand. Okay? And so when we see, for example, someone like a brother or whomever, we might say, that's that person. And usually sometimes you'll see them in their younger self, nicely dressed, even though they might have died when they were 90 years old. You see them in the younger self. That's sometimes a little bit of vanity, or sometimes it's just to show us that they're well and they're okay. Don't worry. Who we are in one lifetime when we die doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean, when I say who, I mean like whether we were a king or a pauper. It doesn't mean anything. When you go over yonder, it's your vibration. What you did, that's what counts. And so I'll give you something, just an example. When my sister passed away, 2 months after she passed away, she came and she said to me, she said, Winnie, I saw our brother. She said his name, but I won't say it here. I saw our brother. And he's only a driver over here. Now she was shocked and she said, our father and our uncle, they're babysitting the English school children. And I laughed. And I know what she meant, because my brother, he died young, but he was at the top of his field when he passed away. And he was like a genius. Like his IQ was like way over the top. And so she was shocked that he was only a driver over there. Well, that's how she would explain it. And I said to her, I said, yes, because what you did, I explained to her that what you did and who you were here in this lifetime doesn't matter. Okay, so we must remember that. Now, we must also remember that each of us has individuality as spirits, with our weaknesses and our strengths. We do not suddenly gain wisdom once we die and go back to the spiritual plane. If we were narcissists, chances are when we go back to that spiritual plane, we will still be narcissists. If we were dishonest and didn't learn while we were here, when we go back, we will still be dishonest. Lo and behold, you have those who cheat karma because they're dishonest. It's a form of dishonesty because you think you can get to where you're going real quick, right? And of course, that's not how it works. There are no exceptions to the rules. You have to do the work, and you have to pay your debt, the karmic debt that you incur. Now, each karmic journey, as I said before, necessitates that we must first cross over to the light. There's no judgment on the spiritual plane, so we would not fear and should not fear going straight into the light. Of course, spirits who are earthbound, they're not ready for a reincarnation yet. Whenever they see the opportunity, and they'll be aware of the opportunity to seize power, they will reincarnate rather quickly. Here they won't try to abscond and delay. They will, because that's what they're all about. And that's what we're here for. And that's why we are here, because of that lust for power, that selfishness and greed. Now, sorry. As previously mentioned, there are those among us who linger and do not cross over because we're too vested in the physical plane and its materiality. Other reasons might cause us to linger. One reason is our desire for forgiveness. So, you'll hang around because, you've hurt people and you pass and they haven't forgiven you and you haven't forgiven yourself. And so there are all these regrets. And also the second reason is the inability to forgive others. So you still, as we say, have them up in Jamaica. You're still angry at them and you leave this world in anger. You might be worried about the people that you leave behind. You might not have looked after your finances, and so you're conscious of the fact that you've left, and you've left your children and they're young. And who's going to take care of them? The mother, perhaps, the father, alone. What's going to happen? And so you're worried. And now, the fourth reason that can affect you crossing over is how we die. How you died. If it's a premature death, something that, an accident or in war, something like that, you're confused and it will take you a while, and some people, as I said, it will take them years to know their confusion, to get over that confusion. And normally you would have your guides guiding you over, but sometimes we're not attuned or not listening even when we go. So we're still wandering. We become wandering spirits, some people would say. And sometimes it might cause us to wander, and we might become nuisances, deliberately or not deliberately, and try to continue life, like we're opening doors to go to places rather than realizing that you don't need to open a door. Just go straight through, okay? You don't need to get on an airplane to go to Timbuktu or China from Canada. Think of it. You're there. That's all. Sometimes for spirits like those, you need professional help. You need a priest, if he knows what he's doing. You need an obiman or some psychic mediums depends on the severity of the case. And some children, of course, they're small. They're still small. When they leave, they haven't realized that they're not really small, but, some of them have more wisdom. Children have more wisdom than adults, so they don't realize, so they're confused, and so they need help. And now there was a light worker, or a psychic medium, and this little girl decided to, she passed away from cancer, and she decided, well, her family who passed on, they tried to call her into the light, but she decided she wanted to stay. She wanted this psychic medium to be her mom. She didn't realize, and she just wouldn't listen to all the call they were calling her over into the light. She just wasn't paying attention. And what had happened was she was aware that this psychic medium would eventually get married, and that the person that she was going to be with was also, he loved children. And, well, had to help her over. Sometimes she does visit that psychic medium just to say hello. But the thing is, that little girl was the child in another lifetime of the psychic medium and that future husband. But this was not the time for her. Now, the fifth reason, a reason for lingering, is not a good one, and that's just to cause mayhem, chaos, mischief, and tyrants, narcissists, and others we label as evil. I don't like to use evil because when you use evil right there, you're going to, some people will introduce demons, and that's demons who make us evil. No, demons are us, right? Demons are us. Depends on what rung of the ladder of soul restorations we find ourselves. But eventually, there is redemption. Eventually. Now, right there, when you have stuff, you get your poltergeists and, different types of spirits. And, of course, you might necessitate, as I said before, a priest, a psychic medium, a shaman, an obeah, as they would say in Jamaica, to sort of solve the issue, an exorcism, in other words. Now, we must remember, that battles can continue. Battles, friction, conflicts that we have while we're alive. Some of us continue it when we're gone with those who are alive, and that's where you get your tyrants and your narcissists. And sometimes after you leave, there's still that friction going on because they haven't forgiven. That's why forgiveness, unconditional forgiveness and love, unconditional love, that will help us to avoid all these things, and we move at a much faster pace into that light. Now remember that when we die, there is no hall of justice as they had in ancient Egyptian belief. And there is no bureaucracy as they had in ancient Chinese belief. There's no judgment day. No, there is no judgment day. We should never fear going into the light, as I said before, because there is no judgment. There is no heaven with good rewards or hell with eternal damnation. We must remember that our Father, our Creator, that's something that is greater than us. Whatever name we choose, whether we call it the divine consciousness, it doesn't matter what name. It doesn't punish us. It's not like us. That's something that is not like us. Vindictive and cruel. No. Eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. Justice. No. That's something that is greater than us. And if we want to say Father, I don't care. You could say Mother if you want. It's loving. And that's why we have the truth that is reincarnation, with death that makes it possible so that we can be born again, to expiate the karma, the law of cause and effect, the death, the karmic debt that we incurred when we came on this earth, when we rebelled against our destiny and became fallen angels. Now remember that there's no directionality when we're talking about the spiritual plane. There's no up and down. So, heaven is up there and hell is down there. Spirits are free from the confines of space and time and matter. The past is the present, is the future. In death, when we fully cross over, we will once again be put into the knowledge of our purpose on this earth and our spirit essence to evolve and to restore our souls. We have to die. Death is a form of grace that our Father has extended to us. And it facilitates, once again, the truth that is reincarnation. With each rebirth, there are experiences to be lived. Mistakes, spiritual mistakes to be corrected. And it is in this light that we continue learning and teaching. It is in this light that we see past actions, learn how to correct wrong actions, learn unconditional love and forgiveness, and decide the details of the rest of the next lifetime as we work towards restoring our souls, advancing our souls, cleansing, purifying, and correcting all those mistakes. And that's why death is a welcome breather between one lifetime and the next. So we always remember, remember that we always make our own decisions, even with the advice and the counsel of our guides and those of the hierarchies. But the choice is up to us. We can heed that counsel, that wise counsel, those wise counsels and good advice, or if we choose to, we don't have to heed them. It's up to us. Now, the one thing I will say here is that we must accept the fact that we are not masters or permanent residents of this earth, but merely tenants passing through. When the time comes, we must not fight, but we must willingly abandon the material world. And once we're humble, humility is so important. We will give, ask for, and accept unconditional forgiveness. And when we depart this lifetime, having given and accepted unconditional love, we should have no problem crossing over into that light. But we must remember, we have got to love ourselves. We have got to forgive ourselves. If not, we cannot create that space to forgive and love others. And I end this part or this video, and I am going to be doing the next one that deals with coping, how to cope with death. Thank you. One divine, universal love.